simple bill. It's actually, in fact, changing one thing on that entire page. But basically, today, currently, an auto dealer has 20 days under Georgia law to perfect their liens with the state. Federal law changed a few years back, took it from 20 to 30. This is just a bill that is going to put Georgia basically in compliance and on the same page as the federal government. Be happy to entertain any questions.
Any questions of the author of the bill? Any questions of the author of the bill? There are no questions. Anybody in the audience want to comment on House Bill 323? It seems, well, there is a question. Okay. Well, I'm going to recognize Mr. Battle for a motion.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that House Bill 223 do pass.
323.
323 do pass.
Okay. Is there a second? Second. There's a second by Mr. Yates. Okay. That's all. It's been a motion to do pass and seconded. All in favor of a do pass recommendation on House Bill 323, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Mr. Hardin, your 20 to 30 day opportunity is on its way. Okay. All right. Next, we're going to call up House Bill 113. 113, Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen of the committee, you were working off as a substitute 2989S. We had discussed this bill earlier several weeks ago. This just deals with changing the definition as to the contents of abandoned motor vehicles. If you look on page 2, the changes are of any vehicle that's been left unattended on private property for a period of not less than 30 days, these contents will be available to that owner. Prescription eyewear, medical devices, child restraining seats, keys, personal documentation, and I would ask that we need to amend this to include firearms.
It's already in there.
Is it? No, I'm sorry, I did. It just went right over it, so it's already in there. And that's quite frankly all it does.
Any questions of the author? We've considered this bill. This is a bill that's been reached agreement on by insurers as well as other people who have a direct interest in the lien issue, and we heard it last time and had some good discussion on it. Do I hear a motion on House Bill 113? Move to pass by Mr. Yates, second by Mr. Battle. Okay, all in favor of action on this is do pass. Say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, all right. Well, we're going to have to slow this down some, guys, because my understanding is the pizza is not here yet. So we have a great, I'll just talk slower. I'll talk Southern. How's that sound? That'll be, I probably shouldn't do that, Mr. Chairman. Okay. Well, the next bill up is by a new member of our group, and that is House Bill 357. We're going to call House Bill 357. Representative Smith, you want to come forward and step to the microphone over there and explain House Bill 357 to us, and I assume you have some people who want to speak on the bill.
I do.
Okay. All right.
First of all, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to be here and introducing House Bill 357. All this does is simply allow licensed private investigators access to driver's license and motor vehicle information. Under the Federal Driver's Privacy Protection Act, the federal government allows it. This just puts us in compliance with the federal government. And I've got the gentleman, John Robertson, over here from the Private Investigators Association. If y'all have any questions you'd like to ask him.
Is that your explanation of the bill?
It is.
That's the total explanation of
That
the bill?
is. Yes, sir.
You don't have anything to say about that other than that?
I like to keep things simple. Yes,
is that
sir.
what you're going to say in the well about that?
That's right. Yes, sir.
Well, can't believe that. Are there any questions of the author of the bill?
We're going to say that to the floor.
Thank you,
Well,
Representative Battles.
you know, there's one. Mr. Hardin's got a question over here for you.
Friendly question, Mr. Chairman. Have you ever been under investigation by a private investigator?
Not to my knowledge, but I wouldn't rule that out.
Thank you, sir. I'm just trying to wait on Pete.
The professionalism level is going down, I think, with the hour. Okay. Anybody else have a question for the author of the bill? I've got a question for you, and this is by way of clarification. I want to make sure that that we don't have a circumstance whereby we've had at other times, which is where private investigators have looked at other states, have used something like the gratis system to get information about a particular person of interest that they had. And I think in one of the states somebody was killed as a result of that information being made available in terms of the address and so on and so forth. But your bill protects against that, does it not?
It does.
Okay, and how does it protect against that?
Under the Federal Driver's Privacy Act, the federal government passed protects against someone being hurt or killed, if I'm not mistaken. And do you have any further information on that?
Under the Driver's Privacy Protection Act, there are certain permissible.
You're going to have to go to the microphone.
I'm sorry.
That's fine. Introduce yourself.
Yes, sir. My name is John Robertson, and I'm here today representing the Georgia Association of Professional Private Investigators. And to answer your question, under the Driver's Privacy Protection Act, there are only permissible purposes that we're allowed to access this information. And as we make these requests, we have to select which permissible purpose we are requesting this information under that act. So.
Okay, you stay there. We have a question for Mr. Powell.
Could you tell this committee what special circumstances that a private investigator can pull the tag to find out who the owner is of that vehicle?
As of right now, there are none. That's why we're asking for this purpose under this law.
Now, as I understood what you said, there are specific
Oh, yes, sir. It has to be used under together evidence in anticipation of litigation. In other words, there has to be a certain case that's going forward in a civil action, not just I can't just pull this young lady's license plate because I like her looks or something of that nature. These, as I say, there are various number of instances where you would need to identify witnesses, identify defendants, locate witnesses and defendants, but all this is in anticipation of litigation. And whenever if this is adopted the way we expect it will be, there will be some company that we have to go through that has an account with the Department of Revenue. And whenever we fill out our request for that company, then we'll have to, number one, to get an account with that company, we're going to have to show our state license and all that we have to go through to be licensed. And when we fill out the request for the information, we have to select this permissible purpose. And it all is going to have to do with some civil matter. So there is an audit procedure where if something was to happen and they go back to this company that pulled this record, then this company is going to come to me and I'm going to have to bring my file down and show what I was doing and the reason that I requested that information.
Further question.
Further question.
Can you define these permissible purposes? I mean, are we talking about a private eye that may be doing insurance investigation? Or are we talking about a private eye that may be trying to see whose vehicle was parked in somebody's driveway in anticipation of a divorce?
That's exactly, both of those instances are. Any type of investigation that we would be conducting that has the potential to go to civil action in court. In other words, it might not necessarily go to court. And there may be a divorce case where we want to identify a witness, which would be a vehicle parked in a certain driveway may be a potential witness in that case. We may want to identify that witness, interview that witness, and see if they may be subpoenaed to come to court later on. Insurance fraud cases, naturally, there may be an instance where we may have someone that may be a witness to insurance fraud. We'd want to identify that person, we'll interview them and subpoena them to possibly come to court. All manners of cases to identify potential defendants. A big thing now is grease theft, stealing grease from restaurants that after they've used it. We can get tags of vehicles right now that have offloaded this grease, that have been caught offloading the grease, but we can't identify who they are in order to place them under surveillance, or in order to have potential to get criminal prosecution in this matter. You have to know where they're stealing the grease at. So in order to follow them around to find out where they're stealing the grease at, we've got the tag numbers because these vehicles have been observed offloading, but we don't know where they live, and we don't know where to go to follow them to get the evidence of them actually stealing the grease. Then we can go to the district attorney in that county and pursue criminal prosecution in that matter.
But if it's a case of a criminal act, private investigators, should they not, in the procedure that they should call a certified law enforcement officer?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
A certified officer, give them the tag number, and then they can run this information.
That's correct, but the problem is you don't know what jurisdiction the thefts are occurring in. So until we can follow these people and find out what jurisdiction. In other words, if I go to Cobb County police officer and say I've got a tag, he's not going to run it for me. But unless I can say I followed this person to a restaurant in Cobb County and I've observed them doing this and that. But as it stands right now, we have the tags, but we can't follow the person because we don't know where the tag is registered to. In other words, we don't know where to begin the surveillance at. That's what I'm trying to say.
I think the point I'm making is that in the case of a criminal investigation or a suspected criminal act, private eyes can contact a law enforcement officer regardless and give them that tag number.
That's correct, yes, sir.
That is correct.
And we have done that, yes, sir. But their response generally is, well, is the theft taking place in our jurisdiction? So, I mean, in other words, you'd have to go around and give it to all the different police jurisdictions, the information.
But is that not the purpose, that we do still have a certain level of security privacy, that individuals have a right to a certain level of privacy without non-sworn law enforcement officers? I mean, even in the area of law enforcement officers have to show good cause as the reason that they're prying into people's personal business. I mean, whether it's GCIC or whether it's looking into gratis.
You're exactly right, yes. And I mean, we had a police officer in Commerce just last week. There was a news story about that.
So, in fact, what we're doing with this, do we not have a potential that we're fixing to move this into the private areas of saying that nothing is sacred as far as finding out someone's personal or running tag number to see who's parked in your driveway? Is that?
Well, I mean, the purpose of it would be you have to be working some potential case for that civil litigation is the reason.
Mr. Battle.
Two questions, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask. First of all, this being a bill that's going to deal with the state of Georgia, and I don't know how many instances that you have where you're in your investigation you have cars that are from out of state. Will this bill also take care of those out-of-state tags? Are you going to be able to get the same information that you are asking for from our local law enforcement?
Well, if it's an out-of-state tag, and if it is a case where we are working with local law enforcement, that would be turned over to them and they would handle that. But an out-of-state tag, this bill would not allow us access to out-of-state tags. However, most states surrounding Georgia and a lot of other states, obviously, this information is available to us. So, for instance, I can run Florida tags. I can get South Carolina tags run, that sort of thing. Those states have opened up this information to us. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, and have a follow-up. Also dealing with the tags. It is a common practice with those who are less than honest. A lot of stolen tags, quite a few.
Uh-huh.
Now, if in your investigation you take a tag number and you ask for that to be run, and it does not match the individual that you're investigating, do you immediately contact law enforcement and say this appears to be a stolen tag, it's on the wrong car?
I would, if I was working with a law enforcement officer. Generally, what I would do is I would contact whoever that tag came back to, and I would say, this vehicle was observed. Say it's involved in retail theft or something of that nature, and it come back registered to you. Well, immediately they're going to say, well, I sold that vehicle, or that tag was stolen off of my vehicle, or something of that nature. And then I would, if a tag has been stolen, then I would notify the law enforcement jurisdiction where that tag was stolen and say, look, this tag was reported stolen. This is an update we have on this tag, and turn all of our information over to them and let them deal with that. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? I've got a question. How many other states allow this provision for PIs?
I'm not exactly sure, but I know of at least 6 that do in the southeast. It's Florida, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, Louisiana, and I believe Alabama.
Okay. Another question. As the bill currently stands, it says okay, this gives the commissioner the authorization power to extend the ability to get the information on the licenses to a person or entity. And the question is, and the line before that is already in code, is to the towing operations, right? So, and they have a valid interest in the salvage areas and things like that they've got to deal with in terms of stolen cars, that type of thing. Yet, am I to understand correctly that from your testimony that the way that this would have to operate, based upon what the department has said, Department of Revenue has said, is you would have to access this system through a towing operator, basically, or somebody else that's already got access to the gratis system. Is that correct?
Well, not a towing operator. And I don't mean to be putting words in the Department of Revenue's mouth, but I spoke to Mr. Mitchell a few days ago from the Department of Revenue, and there are certain companies that have accounts set up. What the Department of Revenue doesn't want to do is have all 600 licensed private investigative companies all at once running down there one day and say, we want an account with you. They are not equipped and set up to handle that. There are certain companies, 2 or 3 other companies, that already have these accounts that we can go through. Some of them, they are database search companies that have accounts with Florida, South Carolina, and the other states. They would just be setting one up in Georgia. So, and the Department of Revenue people can probably address that.
All right, let me make sure we understand this correctly here, because as a person or entity authorized by the commissioner, if you, and maybe this is a departmental question, but if you are authorized, my question really is this: how does the department know? You're going to have to get authorized by the department in any event, will you not?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Because they've got to know who's actually accessing this data. And if you're going through one of the provider firms that already have access to the gratis system, how do they know when you make a request for vehicle title information and so on, license, check, and tag? How do they know who's doing it? I mean, is it you, or is it somebody in Savannah or somebody else that's actually doing it?
Well, it would be someone who has a license issued by the Georgia Secretary of State's office, and that would be established in the application that you would fill out to set up your account to get this information.
Okay. I probably need to hear from the department on this in terms of how that would actually work. But anyway, are there any other questions for this witness? Then we'll move to the department in terms of their comments on this. Anybody have any questions? Thank you, sir, for coming up. And stick around. We may come back to you.
Sure.
Representative Smith, do you have any further comments on this? Why don't you stand by? Mr. Hooper from the department, why don't you come up and talk about how this might operate? Good to see you again, Doug. Aren't you glad to come to these non-controversial meetings we have?
Look forward to every one of them.
I bet.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Douglas Hooper with the Department of Revenue. The several questions asking how the program will be set up are yet to be determined by the department. What I can go through very briefly is how it's set up for towing operators, whereby we do have accounts, I believe, with 2 active companies and 1 potential company right now that has access to the system, which is limited to the specific information related to towing vehicles. When that request comes in from the towing company, when the request comes in from the towing company through one of these third-party providers, they are qualified by the third-party provider as a towing operation that is authorized to do business in this state. As we progress through this bill and as any passage comes to pass, the department would establish specific rules and regulations and the procedures and processes to grant this program access.
Okay, so it'll be done through rule and reg in terms of the access specifics, is what you're.
That's exactly correct.
What you're
yes,
really saying.
We're too general right now to do a specific yes, no, how.
Okay. Care to comment on the volume issue? Transaction volume?
The gentleman said 600. I don't know how many potential 600 people will be addressing the system through the third-party providers. The volume from that point would be unknown.
Is that an issue? Because is the gratis system capable of handling it? I guess is my question.
Probably. It is an issue because each one of those inquiries does put a drain on the system. It couldn't take 600 hits at one time. It would slow the system down. So all of our systems have process filters built in. So if a request comes in, if the system's too busy, it's going to slow that response down for the higher priorities. First of all, law enforcement running their criminal activities, tag and title offices running registrations and titles. Then the other processes would have the next priority. So it would be prioritized in the response. And most of them do run in batch, so it may not be an immediate response all the time.
So what you're saying is, if I read you correctly, if the private investigator is sitting in front of a person's house and requests that information, it's got to go through the provider and then up to the gratis system and then back through the provider, back to the. So the actual identification of the people or the tag effectively is not going to have the same priority as police, and therefore it may well not have any time value associated with it except to provide the information as to whose car this is at some point in time.
The current system design, yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay.
And of course, the associated fees would be passed down for each inquiry as well. We do base our transaction fees on inquiry, not necessarily a response.
Mr. Battle, you have a question for Mr. Hooper?
Yes, and this may not be something that the Revenue Department can answer, but I know Representative Powell had a legitimate question and concern, and that was about privacy. And of course, more people who know information, more of the opportunity of that information being possibly used for someone else's benefit that doesn't have good intentions or professional intentions. What is the level of protection, and maybe even past that, as the fear of prosecution concerning the misuse of this information that they're requesting?
That may not be a specific issue the department could address until we became aware of a misuse, which is addressed under Georgia statute and federal statute. The way this is written right now, or the way the bill is written right now, and I understand you're talking from a substitute, if the person is authorized and come through an authorized provider and the information requested is legitimate, there's probably not a major issue. But at the point the request is made through the electronic systems, we don't know if it's a legitimate request or not. We have to rely on the requesting party and the third-party providers that's coordinating and providing the service. We restrict as much as possible through written request as we do today. And as the gentleman has mentioned, the Federal Driver's Privacy Protection Act, while is permissive, that permissive authority is granted by a written request. If it's authorized and the request is substantiated, we'll provide. If not, we'll require more additional information.
Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Hooper? Department.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Copy of these, the federal regulations.
Representative Smith, I'm going to recognize you for a question there. Mr. Powell will do it that way.
Is there any way, do you have a copy of the federal privacy?
I could get you a copy of that. Yeah, need more.
We're going to suspend for a moment here while I have a chance to take a look at this.
What I'm looking at, this just says who the feds deem acceptable to have access to this information. But I guess what I'm interested in, is there any protections in there? I mean, even law enforcement officers, they have to have good cause, just like GCIC or calling up attack. They have to have a reason
To get that information.
to get that information.
Do we have any? John, do you know if there's any?
We would be covered under the same laws as the law enforcement officers. To answer your question, I don't actually know exactly what the federal law says as far as that is. But for any misuse of the information that's a crime, we would be prosecuted just like any police officer or anybody else who obtained this for personal reasons and not for the stated purpose. One thing I would like to say about licensed private investigators, we go through rigorous training. We're bonded and insured. We're not just somebody that gets a card off the internet or something like that. Our license can be taken away at any time by the Secretary of State's office if we act up or misuse our authority in any way.
Mr. Powell, any further questions?
No, I'm fine. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions of the witness from the committee? I see none. Anybody else out there would like to testify on this bill? Anybody else would like to testify on this bill? Anybody named Magnum out there would like to testify on this bill? It's 357 is the number of the bill, so I mean, it's a kind of an unusual situation for you to have that.
I understand that.
You're probably going to take some grief on that, Mr. Smith. Okay, is there a motion on the bill? You're excused.
All right, thank you.
Move to pass on substitute. HB 357 should have remembered that. Move to pass.
Is there a second on the do pass motion? Second. There's a substitute motion which takes priority. Mr. Powell.
I move that this House be tabled at this time for further study.
Mr. Powell moves that the bill be tabled for further study. It takes precedence, and so we'll vote on the question of whether to table this or not at this point in time. All those in favor of tabling House Bill 357 for further action by this committee, and by the way, we will hear this again before the 30 days runs out, would say aye. All those opposed? Bill's tabled for now. Ms. Smith, you need to get with Mr. Powell and the people who are sponsoring the bill for you, helping you with it, and work out any of the issues that we've talked about. But we will have you back again before the 30th day. Okay? Thank you. With that, we're adjourned. And the food is in. Is there food here? What number? 514. It's Nancy's Pizza. What kind is it? Where is it? 415. It's in 515. So